Captain Jake Morrison walked across the bridge of his ship, the USS Endeavour. His boots made soft sounds on the metal floor as he moved toward the big window that showed space outside. Through the thick glass he could see the planet they had found 3 days ago. It looked like Earth, but the colors were different. The oceans were more green than blue, and the land masses had a purple tint that made everything look strange. "Captain, you need to see this," called Dr. Lisa Barnes from her workstation. She was the team's expert on old alien things. Her voice had that excited tone that meant she had found something important. Jake had heard that tone many times during their long trip through space, but this time it sounded different. This time it sounded like she had found something that would change everything. Jake turned away from the window and walked over to where Lisa was standing. She had her hands on a control panel, and above it floated a three-dimensional picture made of light. The image showed the surface of the planet below them, but it was not the empty world they had first thought it was. "What am I looking at?" Jake asked, though he was starting to understand what he was seeing. The image showed huge structures rising from the ground like crystal mountains. They were not natural formations. Someone had built them. "We found them this morning during the deep scan," Lisa said. She used her fingers to move the image around so Jake could see it from different angles. "They are buried under about 50 feet of dirt and rock, but they are there. And Captain, they are big, really big." Commander Ryan Taylor looked up from his station where he watched for dangers. "How big are we talking about?" Lisa touched a button and numbers appeared next to the crystal structures. "The main building is about 2 miles long and 1 mile wide. The smaller ones around it are each about the size of a city block. And there are dozens of them." Jake felt his heart beat faster. In all his years of exploring space, he had seen many things. He had walked on dead worlds where ancient aliens had once lived. He had seen the ruins of civilizations that had died millions of years ago. But this was different. This felt different. "How old?" he asked. Lisa looked at her screen again. "The computer says at least 2 million years, maybe more." The rock layers above them took a long time to form. 2 million years. Jake let that number sink in. Humans had only been traveling in space for about 300 years. They had only been building cities for about 10,000 years. But someone had built these massive structures 2 million years ago, when humans were still learning how to make fire. "Sir," said Lieutenant Amy Foster from the communication station, "I am picking up energy readings from the structures. Very weak, but they are there." Jake turned to look at her. Amy was young, probably only 25 years old, but she was the best at her job. If she said there was energy down there, then there was energy down there. What kind of energy? He asked. Amy looked at her instruments. "I do not know, sir. It is not like anything in our databases. It is not nuclear power. It is not solar power. It is something else." Jake had spent his whole life meeting alien races that were older and smarter than humans. The Zephyrians had been traveling between stars for 50,000 years, before humans even knew other planets existed. The Vorthan Empire had technology that seemed like magic to human eyes. Every time humans found a new species, they found out that humans were the youngest and most primitive people in the galaxy, but this was different. These structures were older than any alien civilization they had ever met, older than the Zephyrians, older than the Vorthans, older than anyone. "I want a team down there," Jake said. "Full exploration gear, and I want our best people." "Sir," Ryan said from his station, "we do not know if it is safe." "There could be traps or security systems," Jake nodded. Ryan was right to be careful. Many old alien ruins had ways to protect themselves from visitors. Some were just alarms, but others could kill. "We will go slow and careful. But we have to know what is down there." Double quotes. Dr. Barnes was already moving toward the door. "I will get my equipment ready. This could be the find of the century." As Lisa left the bridge, Jake looked back at the floating image of the crystal structures. Something about them looked familiar, though he could not say why. The way they were arranged, the way they rose from the ground like flowers reaching for the sun, it reminded him of something he had seen before. But where? "Amy," he said. Send a message back to Earth. Tell them what we found. Tell them we are going to investigate. Yes, sir, Amy said, and her fingers began moving over her controls. Jake walked back to the big window and looked down at the planet again. Somewhere under all that dirt and rock were buildings that had been old when humans were still living in caves. Who had built them? What had happened to the builders? And why did looking at them make him feel like he was coming home? The next morning, Jake stood in the shuttle bay wearing his exploration suit. The suit was thick and heavy, designed to keep him alive in any environment. Dr. Barnes stood next to him, checking her equipment one more time. With them were Commander Taylor, Lieutenant Foster, and 6 other crew members. Remember, Jake said over the radio in his helmet, we do not know what we are walking into. Stay together. Do not touch anything unless Dr. Barnes says it is safe. The shuttle ride down to the planet took 20 minutes. As they got closer to the surface, Jake could see the tops of the crystal structures poking through the ground like the tips of icebergs. Even mostly buried, they were beautiful. The crystal surfaces caught the light from the planet's sun and threw it back in rainbow colors. They landed about 100 yards from the largest structure. The ground around it was flat and covered with purple grass that moved in the wind like water. As Jake stepped out of the shuttle, he could feel the planet's gravity pulling at him. It was a little heavier than Earth, but not too much. There, Dr. Barnes said, pointing to where the crystal structure rose from the ground. That looks like an entrance. Jake could see what she meant. The crystal had a dark opening in it, like a doorway. As they walked closer, he could see that the opening was perfectly smooth, as if it had been cut with a laser. The edges were so clean they looked like they had been made yesterday. Energy readings are getting stronger, Amy said, looking at a small device in her hand. Jake stopped in front of the entrance and looked inside. It was dark, but he could see that the tunnel went deep into the crystal structure. The walls inside glowed with a very faint light, just enough to see by. Well, he said, here we go. As they stepped inside the ancient structure, Jake felt that strange feeling of familiarity again. It was like walking into a house he had lived in as a child but had not seen for many years. Everything was different, but somehow it felt like home. Behind them, the entrance remained open, letting in light from the alien sun. Ahead of them, the tunnel stretched into darkness, waiting to reveal secrets that had been hidden for 2 million years. The tunnel inside the crystal structure was longer than Jake had expected. They walked for almost 10 minutes before it opened into a huge room. When they stepped inside, lights began to turn on by themselves. The walls started to glow with soft blue light, and Jake could hear a low humming sound like electricity moving through wires. The place is still active, Dr. Barnes said, her voice full of wonder. She held up her scanner and watched the numbers change on its screen. The power source is incredible. After 2 million years, it still has energy. Jake looked around the room. It was enormous, bigger than any building he had ever been inside. The ceiling was so high he could barely see it in the dim light. The walls were covered with symbols that seemed to move and change as he watched them. But what caught his attention most were the things. In the center of the room, there were 12 tall pillars made of the same crystal as the walls. Each pillar was about 20 feet tall and had more of those moving symbols carved into their surfaces. Between the pillars was a circular platform that glowed with soft white light. And floating above the platform was something that made Jake's heart race. It was a map of the galaxy, but not the galaxy as it was now. This map showed the galaxy as it had been long ago, with stars in different places and systems that no longer existed. And there, in one corner of the map, was a small star system that looked very familiar. That's our solar system, Amy said, pointing at the map. But it looks different. Dr. Barnes walked closer to the map, her scanner beeping faster. As she moved, the computer is reading massive amounts of data stored in this thing. It's like a library, but one that holds information about the entire galaxy. Jake studied the map more carefully. The solar system that looked like theirs was marked with a golden circle that pulsed with light. Around it were symbols that seemed to be writing, but not in any language he recognized. "Can you read any of it?" he asked Dr. Barnes. She shook her head. "Not yet, but I'm recording everything. Maybe the computer back on the ship can help us translate." Commander Taylor had been walking around the room, looking at the walls. "Captain, you need to see this," he called out. "There are more rooms. Back here, a lot more." Jake followed Ryan to the back of the big room. There were several doorways leading to other parts of the structure. Through one of them, Jake could see another room filled with what looked like computers or machines. Through another, he saw rows of tables or desks as if this had been a place where people worked. "It's like a city," Amy said. "Or at least a very big building where lots of people lived and worked." Over the next 3 days, they explored more of the crystal structure. What they found amazed them. There were rooms full of machines that still worked. There were halls lined with pictures that showed scenes from long ago. There were chambers filled with crystals that stored information like computer hard drives, but the most amazing discovery came on the 4th day. Dr. Barnes was working in a room full of the information crystals when she made a breakthrough. "Jake, you have to see this," she called over the radio. "I found something incredible." Jake hurried to where she was working. She had connected one of the crystals to her portable computer, and the screen was filled with pictures and symbols. "What is it?" he asked. "Star charts," she said, excitement, making her voice shake. "Detailed maps of the galaxy from 2 million years ago, but look at this." She pointed to a section of the screen. "This shows our solar system, but not as it is now. This shows Earth during the Ice Age, when humans were still primitive." Jake looked at the screen. The image showed a blue and white planet that was definitely Earth, but it was different. There were ice sheets covering parts of the continents, and the coastlines were not the same as they were now. But why would ancient aliens have detailed maps of Earth from 2 million years ago? Jake asked. Dr. Barnes looked at him with wide eyes. "That's what I want to know. But there's more. Look at this." She touched the screen and the image changed. Now it showed what looked like a family tree, but instead of names it had symbols and genetic codes. "I ran this through the computer's biology database," she said. "Jake, these genetic codes match human DNA, not exactly, but close enough that they have to be related." Jake felt cold despite the warm air in the room. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that whoever built this place knew about humans 2 million years ago. They had our genetic information. They were watching us or studying us when we were still cave people." That night, Jake could not sleep. He kept thinking about what Dr. Barnes had found. Ancient aliens with detailed information about early humans. Star charts that showed Earth during the Ice Age. Genetic codes that matched human DNA. None of it made sense. The next morning brought an even bigger surprise. Amy Foster came running into the room where Jake was eating breakfast. "Captain, we have a problem," she said. "Or maybe not a problem. I don't know what to call it. What's wrong?" Jake asked. "I've been monitoring communications from other human ships in this part of the galaxy. 3 other exploration teams have found similar structures on different planets. All of them are sending the same kind of reports we are." Jake stood up quickly. "The same kind of structures?" "Crystal buildings, star maps, information about Earth from long ago. And Captain, there's something else. The structures all seem to be connected somehow. When we turned on the computers here, it sent a signal to the other places." Jake felt his heart beating faster. "How many other places?" "So far, 7. But the number keeps growing as more teams report in." Dr. Barnes came into the room carrying her scanner and looking excited. "Jake, I found the translation program. I can read some of the writing now." "What does it say?" Jake asked. Lisa looked at her scanner. "It talks about something called the first seed, and it mentions Earth by name, but not as Earth. It calls it the nursery world." Jake sat down heavily. "Nursery world?" That's not all," Lisa continued. "The writing talks about children being placed on different worlds to grow and learn. It mentions dozens of planets, including Earth, and Jake, some of the other planets mentioned are the home worlds of the alien races we know." "You mean the Zephyrians? The Vorthans?" Their worlds are all listed here, along with Earth. Them are called nursery worlds. All of them are described as places where children were placed to grow. Jake looked out the window at the alien landscape. Children of who? That's what I'm trying to figure out, Lisa said. But Jake, there's something else. The writing mentions something called the return. It says that when the children are ready, they will return to the stars and find the places of their ancestors. It says they will remember who they really are. Amy's communication device started beeping. She looked at it and her face went pale. Captain, we're receiving a transmission. From Earth, it's from the High Command. Jake took the device from her. This is Captain Morrison. The voice that came through the speaker was Admiral Rodriguez, the head of the human space fleet. Captain Morrison, we have a situation. Every alien government in the galaxy is trying to contact us. They're all asking the same question. What? Question? They want to know if the ancient sites have been activated. They're calling them the progenitor sites. Captain, they seem to think that humans are connected to whoever built those places. Jake looked at Dr. Barnes, then at Amy, then back at the communication device. Admiral, we need to talk. We found something here that changes everything. How soon can you get back to Earth? 2 weeks if we leave now? Do it, and Captain, bring everything you found. Every piece of data, every recording, every sample. Something tells me we're going to need it all. As Jake ended the call, he looked around at his team. They had come to this planet looking for old alien ruins. What they had found was evidence that the history of the galaxy was not what anyone thought it was, and somehow humans were at the center of it all. Jake Morrison stood in the deepest part of the crystal building, looking at something that made his head spin. After 7 days of digging and exploring, they had found the most important room in the entire structure. It was huge, bigger than a football field, and the ceiling was so high it disappeared into darkness above them. But what made Jake's heart race was not the size of the room. It was what was in the center of it. A massive crystal formation rose from the floor like a tree made of light. It was 30 feet tall and glowed with warm golden colors that pulsed like a heartbeat. Inside the crystal, Jake could see the shape of a person. Not a human person, but something taller and more graceful, with long arms stretched out as if welcoming someone home. The energy coming from this thing is incredible, Dr. Barnes said, her voice filled with wonder. She held her scanner up to the crystal and watched the numbers climb higher and higher. It's producing more power than our entire ship uses in a year. Jake walked slowly around the crystal. As he moved, the light inside seemed to follow him, getting brighter when he was close and dimmer when he moved away. It was like the thing was alive and watching him. Captain, Commander Taylor called from across the room. You need to see this. Jake walked over to where Ryan was standing near the wall. Built into the crystal wall were 2 perfect handprints, just the right size for human hands. Above them were symbols that glowed brighter as Jake got closer. It's like it's waiting for someone to touch it, Amy Foster said. Looking at the handprints with wide eyes, Jake stared at the handprints. Something deep inside him was telling him to put his hands on them. It was not a logical thought. It was more like an instinct, like the way a bird knows which direction to fly when winter comes. Captain, Ryan said, we don't know what will happen if you touch that. It could be dangerous. Jake nodded. Ryan was right to be careful. But every part of his body was telling him that this was why they were here. This was what they were supposed to find. I have to do it, Jake said. I don't know why, but I know. I have to. He placed his hands on the crystal handprints. The moment his skin touched the surface, the room exploded with light. The walls began to shine like stars, and the crystal in the center became so bright that Jake had to close his eyes. When the light faded, they were not alone, standing in front of the crystal was a being that looked like a human, but perfect in a way that no human had ever been. It was tall, maybe 8 feet, with skin that glowed softly and eyes that looked like deep space filled with stars. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. Welcome home, children of Earth, the being said. Jake tried to speak, but no words came out. His team stood frozen, staring at the impossible figure in front of them. The being smiled. And when it did, Jake felt warmth spread through his body like sitting by a fire on a cold winter night. "Do not be afraid. I am Marcus, and I have been waiting for you for a very long time." Dr. Barnes found her voice first. "What are you? How long have you been here?" Marcus turned to look at her with kind but sad eyes. "I am a memory, a teacher, a keeper of truth that was hidden so it could one day be found again. I have been sleeping in this crystal for 2 million years, waiting for my children to grow. Strong enough to return to the stars? Children?" Jake finally managed to say, "What do you mean, children?" Marcus raised his hand, and suddenly the air in the room filled with pictures made of light. Jake could see planets and stars, great cities floating in space, and beings that looked like humans but were clearly much more advanced than any human had ever been. "Long ago," Marcus said, "your people ruled this galaxy. We built wonders that spanned from one end of space to the other. We created life on dead worlds. We moved stars to bring light to dark places. We had power beyond your imagination." The pictures changed to show something terrible. Great ships fought battles in space, while planets burned below them. Entire star systems were being destroyed by weapons that tore holes in space itself. "But we made a mistake," Marcus continued, his voice heavy with sadness. "We had great power, but we did not have great wisdom. We became proud. We fought wars against each other. We nearly destroyed everything in the galaxy, including ourselves." Stepped forward. "What happened to you? How did you survive?" "We realized what we had become," Marcus said. "In our final act of wisdom, we decided to start over. We took our children and scattered them across the galaxy. We gave them new worlds to live on. We took away their memories of what they had been. We made them forget the old ways so they could learn new ones." Jake felt like the ground was moving under his feet. "Are you saying that humans are your descendants? That we used to rule the galaxy?" "Not just humans," Marcus said. The pictures in the air changed to show different alien races. Jake recognized the Zephyrians with their blue skin and large eyes. He saw the Vorthans with their tall bodies and silver hair. He saw dozens of other alien species that humans had met during their travels through space. "All of them?" Dr. Barnes asked in a whisper. "All of them," Marcus confirmed. "Every intelligent race in this galaxy. You are all children of the same family, scattered to different worlds, given different bodies, but all carrying the same spark of life that we gave you." Long ago, Commander Taylor had been quiet, but now he spoke up. "The aliens we've met, the ones with better technology than us. They're our relatives?" "They are your brothers and sisters," Marcus said. "Some learned faster than others. Some remembered small pieces of the old knowledge, but none of them remembered the whole truth until now." Jake's mind was spinning with questions. "Why are you telling us this now? Why not before?" Marcus looked at him with those star-filled eyes. "Because the time of learning is almost over. Your children have grown strong. They have spread across the galaxy. Soon they will have the same power that we once had. The question is whether they will make the same mistakes we made." "And you think humans can stop them?" Jake asked. "I think humans can guide them," Marcus said. "You are the first to return to the ancient places. You are the first to learn the truth. What happens next depends on what you do with this knowledge." The pictures in the air began to fade, and Marcus himself started to become transparent, like a ghost that was disappearing. "My time is ending. The crystal can only keep me alive for a few more moments. But there are others like me sleeping in other places, waiting for their children to find them." "Wait," Jake said. "What do you want us to do?" "How do we tell people about this?" Marcus smiled one last time. "Be wise, young captain. Help your family remember not just the power they once had, but the wisdom they need to use it well. The galaxy is about to change. Make sure it changes for the better." The light around Marcus grew bright for a moment, then faded completely. He was gone, leaving only the soft glow of the crystal behind. Jake and his team stood in silence for a long time. The weight of what they had learned was almost too much to bear. They were not the youngest race in the galaxy. They were the oldest. Every alien species they had ever met was their family, their children, grown up and scattered across the stars. "We have to go back to Earth," Dr. Barnes said finally. "We have to tell them what we found." Jake nodded, but his mind was already racing ahead to what would happen when they shared this news. How do you tell an entire planet that they are the descendants of ancient gods? How do you explain to the galaxy that everything they thought they knew about their history was wrong? "Amy," he said, "send a message to Earth, tell them we're coming home. And tell them to prepare for news that will change everything." As they left the crystal chamber and walked back through the ancient building, Jake looked up at the alien sky through the transparent walls. Somewhere out there were billions of beings who thought they were strangers to each other. Soon they would learn they were all family. The question was whether that knowledge would bring them together or tear them apart. The journey back to Earth took 2 weeks, but for Jake Morrison, it felt like 2 years. Every day brought new messages from human colonies across the galaxy, all reporting the same thing. The crystal structures on dozens of worlds had awakened. Ancient beings like Marcus were appearing everywhere, telling the same incredible story to shocked human explorers, but the really disturbing news was coming from the alien governments. Jake stood on the bridge of the USS Endeavor, reading the latest reports from Admiral Rodriguez. His hands shook slightly as he scrolled through message after message from alien leaders across the galaxy. "Captain," Amy Foster said from her communication station, "we're receiving another transmission from the Zephyrian High Council. They're demanding to speak with Earth's leaders immediately." Jake looked at the communication panel. The Zephyrians had been trying to contact Earth for a week now. So had the Vorthans, the Keth Assembly, and every other major alien power in the galaxy. All of them were asking the same questions. What do they want to know? Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. "They want to know if the stories are true," Amy said. "They want to know if humans are really the progenitors." Dr. Barnes looked up from her research station where she had been studying the data they collected from Marcus. "Jake, I've been analyzing the genetic information we found. The computer has been comparing it to DNA samples from every known alien race. They match. Not exactly, but close enough that there's no doubt. Every intelligent species in the galaxy shares the same basic genetic pattern. We really are all related." Jake sat down heavily in his captain's chair. It was one thing to hear Marcus tell them they were all family. It was another thing to see the scientific proof. Commander Taylor was monitoring the ship's sensors when he suddenly sat up straight. "Captain, we have company. 3 ships just dropped out of hyperspace. They're not human." Jake felt his stomach drop. "What kind of ships?" "2 Zephyrian cruisers and 1 Vorthan battleship. They're moving to intercept us." Jake had been expecting this. As word spread across the galaxy about the awakening of the ancient sites, the alien governments had become more and more agitated. Some wanted to meet with humans to learn more. Others seemed angry, as if they blamed humans for disturbing their comfortable view of the universe. "They're sending a communication," Amy said. "Put it on screen." The main viewing screen flickered to life, showing 2 figures. On the left was High Admiral Zefka of the Zephyrian fleet, his blue skin darker than usual with anger. On the right was War Leader Vashtor of the Vorthan Empire, her silver hair pulled back in the style that meant she was ready for battle. "Human vessel," Zefka said, his voice cold as space ice. "You will stop and prepare to be boarded." Jake stood up. "High Admiral War Leader, this is Captain Morrison. We are on our way back to Earth with important information." "Information about lies your people have been spreading," Vashtor said, her yellow eyes burning with anger. "You dare to claim that you are our creators, that we are your children?" "We didn't claim anything," Jake said carefully. "We simply reported what we found." "What you found is impossible," Zefka said. "The Zephyrian people have ruled space for 50,000 years. We built our first starships when your species was still learning to make fire. We will not accept these lies." Dr. Barnes stepped forward. High Admiral War Leader, I understand this is hard to believe, but the evidence is clear. The genetic analysis, the historical records, the ancient sites that are awakening across the galaxy, they all tell the same story. Evidence can be faked. Vashtor said, data can be changed. We have seen no proof that cannot be explained by human trickery. Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. What would convince you? What kind of proof would you accept? The two alien leaders looked at each other. Finally, Zethka spoke. Bring us to one of these ancient sites. Let us see for ourselves what you claim to have found. Jake thought about it. They were only 6 days from Earth, but the nearest active site was 3 days in the opposite direction. If he went there, it would delay their return home. But if he could convince these two leaders, maybe they could help calm the growing panic across the galaxy. There's an active site in the Kepler system, Jake said. We can be there in 3 days. We will follow you, Vashtor said. But if this is some human trick, if you are trying to deceive us, there will be consequences. The communication ended, and Jake looked at his crew. Ryan, set course for Kepler 442b. Amy, send a message to Admiral Rodriguez. Tell her we're making a detour. 3 days later, Jake found himself standing in the same crystal chamber where they had first met Marcus. But this time he was not alone. High Admiral Zethka and War Leader Vashtor stood beside him, along with their personal guards and scientists. This is impressive, Zethka admitted, looking around at the glowing walls. But impressive does not mean truthful. Jake walked over to the crystal handprints in the wall. There's only one way to find out. He placed his hands on the crystal surface, and once again the room filled with light. But this time, when Marcus appeared, he was not alone. 2 other figures materialized beside him. One looked like a taller, more perfect version of a Zephyrian. The other resembled a Vorthan, but with an grace and dignity that made the current Vorthans look like children. Welcome, my children, Marcus said, looking directly at Zethka and Vashtor. I am glad you have come home. The Zephyrian admiral stepped back as if he had been hit. Impossible. You look like us, but different, older. The figure that looked like a Zephyrian smiled. I am Kethrov, the first seed. Long ago, I helped plant your people on the world you now call home. You have grown strong and wise, though perhaps not as wise as I had hoped. War Leader Vashtor was staring at the Vorthan-like being with wide eyes. Who are you? I am Tashvev, the first seed, the being said. I remember when your ancestors were placed on their new world. I remember teaching them their first words in the language that became yours. This is not possible, Vashtor whispered. Marcus stepped forward. It is not only possible, it is necessary. The time has come for all our children to learn the truth. You are not separate races competing for dominance of the galaxy. You are family scattered long ago, but now ready to be reunited. Zethka found his voice. If this is true, if we are all related, then why have we been fighting each other for thousands of years? Because you forgot, Kethra said sadly. We made you forget, hoping you would learn wisdom before you remembered power. Some of you learned faster than others. Some forgot more completely. But all of you carried the same spark of life we gave you. The alien leaders stood in shocked silence as the 3 ancient beings showed them images of the past. Pictures of their ancestors being placed on new worlds. Videos of the great empire that had once ruled the galaxy. Evidence that could not be faked or denied. When the images faded and the ancient beings disappeared, High Admiral Zethka and War Leader Vashtor looked at each other with new understanding. If this is true, Zethka said slowly, then everything we believed about ourselves is wrong. Jake stepped forward. Not wrong, just incomplete. You are still the same people you always were, you just know more about where you came from now. Vashtor looked at Jake with new respect. And humans, you are truly our elder brothers? We're all children of the same family, Jake said. Some of us just remembered first. The return journey to Earth was very different from the trip out. Instead of 3 ships suspicious of each other, they traveled as a small fleet working together. Zethka and Vashtor spent hours talking with Jake and his crew. sharing stories and comparing their cultures. But as they got closer to Earth, new challenges arose. Reports came in of fighting breaking out in several systems as some alien races refused to accept the new truth. Other races were demanding immediate meetings with human leaders. Still others were withdrawing from all contact, apparently too shocked to respond. "This is just the beginning," Dr. Barnes said as they watched Earth grow larger on the main screen. "When this news spreads to every world in the galaxy, everything is going to change," Jake nodded. "The question is whether it changes for the better or for the worse." As the USS Endeavour entered Earth's orbit, Jake could see dozens of ships from every major alien race waiting in space around the planet. The galaxy had come to Earth looking for answers. Now it was up to humanity to provide them. 6 months after the discovery that changed everything, Jake Morrison stood in the observation deck of New Terra Station looking out at something no human had ever seen before. Hundreds of ships from dozens of different species hung in space around Earth like a massive festival of lights. Zephyrian cruisers with their blue hulls floated next to Vorthan battleships with silver wings. Smaller ships from races Jake had never met before drifted between the larger vessels like curious children, but not all the ships were friendly. "Captain," Admiral Rodriguez said, walking up behind him, "the Keth Assembly is still refusing to accept the evidence. Their fleet commander says they will not bow to humans just because we found some old ruins." Jake nodded grimly. The past 6 months had been the most difficult in human history. When news of humanity's true origin spread across the galaxy, the reactions had been wildly different. Some alien races had welcomed their elder brothers with joy and relief. Others had been angry and suspicious. A few, like the Keth, had declared war rather than accept that their entire understanding of history was wrong. "What about the others?" Jake asked. "The Zephyrians and Vorthans are fully committed to the new alliance," Admiral Rodriguez said. "High Admiral Zethka has been invaluable in convincing the smaller races to join us. War leader Vashtor has been working to stop the conflicts in the outer systems." Jake looked at the planet Earth spinning slowly below them. It was strange to think that this small blue world, which humans had thought was insignificant in the vast galaxy, was actually the key to understanding everything. Earth had not been chosen as humanity's home by accident. It had been carefully selected by their ancestors as the perfect place to learn humility and wisdom. "Sir," Dr. Barnes said, joining them at the observation window, "the representatives are ready for the final council meeting." Jake took a deep breath. Today would decide the future of the galaxy. Representatives from every major alien race had come to Earth for what they were calling the Great Council. Some came in peace, hoping to learn more about their shared past. Others came with demands and threats. All of them wanted answers. The council meeting was held in the largest chamber on New Terra Station. Jake entered the room and saw something that would have been impossible just a year ago. Beings from across the galaxy sat around a huge circular table, their different shapes and colors creating a rainbow of life. But the tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. At one end of the table sat the friendly faces. High Admiral Zethka represented the Zephyrian Federation. War. Leader Vashtor spoke for the Vorthan Empire. Chancellor Bemlu came from the Theta Collective, a group of small peaceful races that had immediately accepted the truth about their origins. At the other end sat the hostile delegations. General Krathvo of the Keth Assembly glared at everyone with eyes like burning coals. Prime Minister Yeld Essay of the Nexus Alliance kept checking her weapons as if she expected a fight to break out at any moment. Admiral Kurtzy of the Iron Worlds had not spoken to a single human since arriving at Earth. And scattered around the table were dozens of representatives from smaller races, all waiting to see which way the galaxy would turn. Jake stood at the head of the table, feeling the weight of 2 million years of history on his shoulders. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "We are here because our galaxy stands at a crossroads. We can choose to move forward together, or we can tear ourselves apart with old fears and new anger." General Krathvo slammed his hand on the table. "Enough pretty words, human. You expect us to believe that your primitive race once ruled the galaxy? You expect us to bow down to people who barely learned to fly between stars 300 years ago? We don't expect anyone to bow down, Jake said calmly. We expect everyone to work together as the family we have always been. Family? Prime Minister Yeldese laughed bitterly. If we are family, then why did you abandon us? Why did you let us struggle alone for millions of years while you lived in comfort on your paradise world? Dr. Barnes stepped forward. Because our ancestors learned something important. They learned that power without wisdom leads to destruction. They chose to start over so that all of us could learn to be better than they were. Easy words from people who claim to be our elders, Admiral Kurthzy said coldly. But where is your proof? Where is this great ancient technology? If you are truly the progenitors, show us power that matches your claims. Jake had been expecting this challenge. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small crystal device that Dr. Barnes had created using technology from the ancient sites. This contains the complete genetic history of every race in this room. It can show us exactly how we are all related. He placed the device on the table and activated it. Immediately, the air above the table filled with a three-dimensional family tree made of light. At the base of the tree was the symbol for the first seed, the original empire. From there, branches spread out to show how different groups had been scattered to different worlds. Each branch eventually led to one of the races sitting around the table, but the most amazing part was watching the branches connect. The Zephyrians and the Vorthans were closely related, almost like brothers. The Keth shared ancestors with three other races. Even the distant Iron Worlds had cousins among the smaller, peaceful species. This is impossible, General Krathvo whispered, staring at the family tree. No, High Admiral Zethka said quietly, this explains everything. Why our languages have similar words, why our mathematics use the same base principles, why we can all breathe the same air and eat many of the same foods. We have been wondering about these similarities for thousands of years. War leader Vashtor stood up and looked around the table. I have fought wars against half the races in this room. I have killed people who, it turns out, are my distant cousins. How do we move forward from that? The same way families always move forward, Jake said. We forgive, we learn, we do better. Prime Minister Yeldese was studying the family tree intently. If this is true, if we are all related, then the border wars in the Outer Rim are civil wars. We have been fighting our own family for territory and resources, which is exactly why our ancestors chose to start over, Dr. Barnes said. They hoped that by the time we remembered who we would have learned to value peace over power. Admiral Kurthzy was silent for a long time, studying the genetic data. Finally, he spoke. The Iron Worlds have been alone for so long, we forgot that we had family among the stars. If this is true, then we have much to think about. Jake looked around the table. I know this is overwhelming. I know it changes everything you thought you knew about yourselves, but we have a choice to make. We can let this knowledge divide us, or we can let it unite us. General Krathvo was the last holdout. And what do you propose? That we all hold hands and sing songs about being family? I propose that we create something our ancestors never managed, Jake said. A galaxy where different races work together instead of fighting each other. A place where wisdom comes before power and peace comes before conquest. Chancellor Bemlu, who had been quiet through most of the meeting, finally spoke up. The Theta Collective supports this proposal. We have always believed that cooperation is stronger than conflict. One by one, the other representatives began to speak. High Admiral Zethka pledged the support of the Zephyrian Federation. War leader Vashtor promised that the Vorthan Empire would work for peace. Even Admiral Kurthzy said that the Iron Worlds would consider joining the new alliance. General Krathvo sat in stubborn silence until the very end. Finally, with everyone else at the table looking at him, he spoke. The Keth Assembly will need time to discuss this with our people, but we will not stand in the way of those who choose to move forward. It was not a perfect ending. But it was a beginning dot as the council meeting ended and the representatives returned to their ships. Jake stood once again at the observation window, but now the view was different. Instead of ships facing each other, with suspicion and anger, he could see crews working together to set up communication networks and trade routes. Dr. Barnes joined him at the window. "Think it will work?" she asked. Jake watched as a Zephyrian transport docked with a Vorthan station. Both crews working together to unload supplies. "Our ancestors tried to rule the galaxy through power and failed. Maybe we can do it through wisdom. And if we fail?" Jake smiled. "Then our children will try again. And they'll be wiser than we are, just like we're wiser than our ancestors. That's how families grow." Outside the window, the ships of 100 worlds began to move together toward a future that none of them could have imagined just 1 year ago. The galaxy was finally coming home,